Paul Ryan to speak with The Times on Congress's packed agenda. Washington, Speaker Paul D. Ryan will participate on Thursday in a Times Talks conversation with The New York Times, moderated by Jonathan Weissman, The Times' congressional editor. When and where? 8:40 a.m. Eastern at the Newseum in Washington. How to watch? The conversation will be streamed live to The Times' homepage, YouTube page and Facebook page. How to participate? A portion of the conversation will be devoted to questions from the audience, including the audience on Facebook. Follow along and put your questions in the comment section, and they may be put to Mr. Ryan. Until then, here is a primer on what's coming on Capitol Hill and what's sure to be discussed with Mr. Ryan. After 8 months political infighting and little legislative action, Congress returns to Washington from the August recess facing a crashing September. This month could determine whether Republicans deliver on any of their big promises before next year's midterm elections. There is no time to spare. Government funding could run out at the end of September. The debt ceiling could be breached within weeks. And there is that promised rewrite of the tax code. Continue reading the main story. The ability of Republican leaders to handle these tasks may determine how long the party stays in power. President Trump's approval ratings have been sliding, and whispers have been growing louder as to whether the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, or Mr. Ryan will need to step aside if the tax overhaul collapses, like the repeal of the Affordable Care Act did. Confidence in the party's ability to fulfill its ambitions is increasingly shaky. There is a big split of private opinion among Republicans about whether you'll have a tax bill at all, said Steve Bell, a former Republican staff director of the Senate Budget Committee who now works at the Bipartisan Policy Center. This will be the messiest September that I've seen in the 43 years that I've been in Washington. One person directing Congress through the mess will be Mr. Ryan, who spent much of August making the case across the country for a tax overhaul. On Thursday, he will shed light on where the effort stands at the inaugural Times Talks TC. The public event comes at a pivotal time in the process, as Republicans have promised to release a tax plan this month. Steering the first rewrite of the tax code since 1986 has long been a dream of Mr. Ryan's, but so far, the process has proved arduous. The healthcare failure was a major setback to the tax effort, and Mr. Trump's provocative use of social media has been a distraction for members of his party. In late July, Mr. Ryan agreed to cast aside the border adjustment tax on imports that was the centerpiece of his tax overhaul vision. Since then, lawmakers, lobbyists and businesses have been eagerly anticipating details on a new approach for making good on the promise to cut taxes for businesses and individuals and to move to a territorial tax system, which would largely exclude foreign earned income from American taxes. In theory, this will all happen without ballooning the deficit. During the recess, members of the Trump administration worked with Congress to figure out how deep they can reduce tax rates, which deductions to eliminate and how to make the tax code simpler. Intense battles are expected over state and local tax deductions, possible changes to the mortgage interest deduction, any changes to the tax system that benefit the rich and the treatment of taxes for small pass-through businesses not subject to the corporate income tax. It remains to be seen whether the eventual tax legislation will be deficit neutral and permanent, or whether Republicans will have to settle for temporary tax cuts that lose revenue. Temporary cuts would be a blow to deficit hawks and a significant scaling back of tax code overhaul that many business leaders say is needed. Tax writing committees have been looking at ways to make some parts of the plan temporary and some parts permanent as Republicans continue to assume they will get few, if any, votes from Democrats. For now, they are planning to use the budget reconciliation process, which requires a simple majority in the Senate for passage. But that comes with its own set of complications. The House and Senate have yet to even agree upon a budget resolution, which they must do before they can pass a tax bill. Divisions within the Republican Party make it far from clear that this will be possible. As critical as tax reform is to Republicans, raising the statutory borrowing limit and funding the government are more pressing priorities. At this point, Republicans are considering a three-month continuing resolution to keep the government running and attaching it to a debt ceiling bill. That would buy more time and prevent markets from becoming jittery over the prospect of a shutdown or a default. An initial $7.8 billion emergency package to aid recovery for Hurricane Harvey could be rolled into the government funding legislation. That would make it more difficult for conservative Republicans to demand deep spending cuts in exchange for raising the debt ceiling. Mr. Ryan and Mr. McConnell will probably need the help of some Democrats if fiscal conservatives balk at approving new spending without requisite cuts. With so much to do, Republicans could come under pressure to pass a simple tax cut and declare victory. But with other costs mounting and savings hard to find, that too will be a hard sell for a party that preaches fiscal restraint. While the president and congressional leaders want to turn focus to tax reform, the issues they have to deal with in September will make that more difficult, said Ed Lawrenson, a senior advisor for the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. Not just because the time and attention those issues will require will make it harder to focus on tax reform, but they will make it harder to justify tax cuts which increase the deficit.